Today we're making low-fat donuts. And donuts are an awesome treat, but they are really, really unhealthy. They're a high-fat, high-sugar batter that's then deep fried. And so we're going to make a lower-fat version of that so that maybe we can enjoy that experience a little bit more often than the once a year or so that we really should limit ourselves to on real high-fat donuts. I've got all the ingredients laid out, and we're going to begin with 1.5 cups of flour in our mixing bowl, 1/2 of a cup plus an extra tablespoon of sugar, and then I've got 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder, along with 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. In here I've got 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon and 1/4 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, and that's what these things here are. And our liquid ingredients are going to consist of some milk, an egg substitute, which we'll talk about here in just a few minutes, some margarine, and a little bit of vanilla. And when these come out of the oven, we're going to garnish them with a little bit of powdered sugar. So let's begin. I've preheated the oven to the acquired 400 degrees that the recipe asks for. And I've got a mini bundt pan, and this is kind of how these are supposed to be donuts. They were going to have a little hole in the middle and be a little ring, and so they're going to look like donuts. But the batter really is more of a muffin batter, which is why it's so much lower in fat. This mini bundt pan is quite similar to a cupcake pan. In volume also, the portions are about the same amount of batter. If you have mini bundt pans that are a little bit bigger, then maybe you're going to be putting a little bit more batter in them and possibly adjusting the bake time. You just kind of have to use your best judgment on that. But these mini buns have been sprayed with non-stick spray. Now, if you're in my class, you're going to be using mini bundt pans that are a little bit bigger, and you'll be given 5 of them. Those 5 will not set very well in the oven individually, and so you're going to need to put them on a baking tray. And you're going to bake half of your batter on the first go around, and then you'll need to wash your bundt pans, re-spray them, and put the rest of your batter in. So in the end, you should have 10 low-fat donuts. All right, let's begin with all of our dry ingredients. We're going to start by putting in the sugar, our leavening and salt, the cinnamon and nutmeg, and we're going to mix that around. The margarine does need to be melted, and margarine, for this recipe, it's easiest if you buy the margarine that is in sticks. The recipe asks for 1/4 of a cup of margarine melted, and so each stick, either butter or margarine, is 1/2 a cup. So we're going to cut the stick in half, and that's the portion that we need. We're going to put it in a microwave-safe container and melt it. Margarine is a product that was invented in the 1950s. And it was invented as a substitute for butter. Butter is extremely high in saturated fat, and so margarine was an answer for people who struggle with heart disease and high cholesterol, for getting rid of some of that saturated fat out of their diet, because we do use an awful lot of butter on quite a few things that we eat regularly. Margarine is lower in saturated fat, however, the amount of preservatives and chemical processes that it takes to make margarine can have some other health concerns instead. So while margarine accomplishes one goal, it certainly presents us with some other health concerns. You certainly can use just regular butter in this. It would be slightly higher in saturated fat, but calorie for calorie, margarine and butter are really the same number of calories and the same number of grams of fat. They just have a different kind of fat that could be a concern for some people and less of a concern for others. All right, I've got 1/2 a cup of skimmed milk already measured out, and the recipe asks you to use an egg substitute. Eggs are high in saturated fat, the yolk is. Egg whites are nothing but protein, very, very healthy thing to include in your diet. And an egg substitute is basically egg whites with a little bit of artificial color and a little bit of artificial flavor added to them so that they taste like regular mixed up eggs. It does call for 1/4 of a cup of it. And if you didn't want to go to the trouble to buy this egg substitute, if you look at the package, it tells you that 1/4 of a cup of this product is equal to 1 large egg. So you could substitute 1 large egg for this ingredient instead. I'm going to add this to my 1/2 cup of milk, and so I just brought the measure up to 3/4 of a cup. If you were substituting with the 1 large egg, which is what we'll do in class, I would recommend that you break your egg into a 1/4 of a cup measure. Eggs vary in size and volume just by a little bit. Break your egg into the cup, and if it's short of being full, top it off with just a little bit more skim milk that you're using in the recipe, so that you don't compromise and end up with a dough that's a little bit too dense or a little bit too dry in the end. All right, to this, I'm going to add my 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And once my margarine is slightly cool, I'm going to go ahead and incorporate that as well. Pull well into the center of your dry ingredients. Add your liquid and mix by pulling the dry ingredients in from the sides instead of stirring with muffins, which is essentially what this is. You want to always avoid over mixing generally, because it produces sort of a stiff or chewy product, and when the batter is low in fat, there's even more of a possibility of that happening. So you really want to be conscientious about how much you're mixing this. You really want to just stir it until it's moistened like that. Then we are going to begin portioning the batter into our mini buns. And we want to add about 2 round tablespoons to each container. And this is a little bit challenging. When the pans are a little bigger, it's a little bit easier, so your venture on this in class should be a little simpler. Maybe get a spoon instead. And you're going to go around the center portion of the mini buns with your 2 tablespoons or so. All right, keeping in mind that you'll have just 5 slightly larger mini bun pans. You're going to use only half the batter the first time. Your batter should only be about 3/4 of an inch deep in your pans. Those pans then will go on a tray, be placed in the oven. You're only going to bake them for 10 minutes because there really just isn't that much batter there. You'll pull them out. You're going to invert them, give a tap. They should fall out. You have to wash the mini bun pans, respray them, and then continue baking with the rest of your batter. Again, you're going to have 2 rounds of baking and only 10 minutes at a time. When they come out, you'll just garnish them with a little bit of powdered sugar, and they will look like donuts. Bon appetit.